got the prestigious winner of the Nebraska Farmers Union President's Award, our good friend and member Chuck Hassebrook.
Well, thanks, John. It's an honor to be here with Farmers Union. It's an honor to be with the family farm organization that has always stood for the principle that those who work the land should have the opportunity to own the land and own the fruits of their labor. And it's also a special opportunity to be here as a 35-year member of Farmers Union. And, you know, the person who more than anyone else brought me into Farmers Union, brought me into the Farmers Union family, passed this holiday season, Neil Oxley. And so I would like to take just a few seconds of silence to remember Neil, who was a great leader, who more than anyone prompted the passage of Initiative 300 in this state, brought me into this organization. And so if we take 5 seconds of silence, I would appreciate that for Neil. Thanks. Thanks for doing that. I'm running for governor because I want to go to work to create good jobs and genuine opportunity for every Nebraskan in every community, from the Missouri River in Omaha, the farms and ranches, small towns, small businesses across rural Nebraska to the North Platte River in the Panhandle. You know, Nebraska can only achieve its full potential if every Nebraskan in every community has the opportunity to achieve their potential. And that's really been my life's calling. It goes back to when I was a teenager. You know, a lot of people kind of shook their head at me as a teenager. You know, when I graduated from high school, Lakeview High School outside Columbus, in our senior class annual, they had an annual yearbook. They, of course, for graduating class, they would put a picture of each of the seniors with a little motto beneath them. And you know, for most of my classmates, they'd write things like, "Her smile brightens the room," or "To know him is to have a friend." But under my picture, they wrote, "An argument a day keeps the teachers awake." And I have to say, it started 2 weeks into my freshman class. I had an algebra teacher who was trying to make a point, I guess, about the smart way to do things, and he said, "Now here's the way an educated person would do it, and here's the way an old farmer would do it." That was my first argument with the teacher. But you know, even at an early age, I knew I wanted to do more than argue. I wanted to make a difference. And I remember the day when I was 18 years old, I was driving a tractor pulling a hay rack on my mom and dad's farm along Highway 81, North Platte Center. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And I thought, you know, if I could just figure out a way to make a living fighting for the things I believe in, that would be the most rewarding life. And you know, I've been blessed with that opportunity. As John said, I spent 36 years at the Center for Rural Affairs, fighting alongside Farmers Union, hand in hand with Farmers Union, to create a future for family farming and ranching, to pass Initiative 300, the nation's toughest anti-corporate farm law, family farm law that stood for 25 years in this state, to win new incentives for beginning farmers and value-added enterprises, and to create a better future for our small towns and rural communities, to support the development of our world-class renewable energy wind resource. I also had the privilege and the responsibility of serving for 18 years on the University of Nebraska Board of Regents, representing Northeast Nebraska, Columbus, Norfolk, Fremont, and family farms and small towns in between. And that meant a lot to me because I was a student at the University of Nebraska, and that was a great opportunity for me. You know, my mom and dad never had the opportunity to even go to high school. They were farm kids during the Depression. And so my mom, who's a very smart person, only had the chance to go to the 8th grade. My dad was able to go to 10th grade because the one-room school where he went and where I later went offered school to 10th grade. But I had a chance to go to college. And by starting out at a community college And by working, I raised hogs, built grain bins, and even worked building and painting radio TV towers for 5 months. I was able to come out of college with $1,000 of debt. But by the time, and my dad forgave it. But by the time I got on the Board of Regents in 1995, you couldn't do that anymore. So I went to work trying to ensure that higher education would be affordable to the sons and daughters of ordinary working families. When I started, we had $0 in the budget for financial aid for modest income working families. And by the time, and I was always the champion for financial aid when I was on the board. By the time I got off, we had $11 million there to help students of modest means attend college. And a lot of those were rural students. I can tell you that UNK, which mostly University of Nebraska-Kearney, which mostly serves students from rural Nebraska, over half of the students qualify for financial aid and are drawing on that help. And I'm proud of the role I played in that. Now, the other thing I did is I fought to make the university really serve family farms and ranches in rural Nebraska. I got it for the first time to get involved in the beginning farmer issue. We hired a farmers union member, Dave Gaylor. I see Dave's mom and dad here today, John and Mardell. And for the first time, we hired somebody specifically to work with beginning farmers. And then at my last meeting after 18 years, I finally got him to create a Rural Futures Institute, to really go to work, to create a better future out here in rural Nebraska, in our small towns and rural communities. The reason I'm running for governor is I want to do more. I want to do more to create good jobs, genuine opportunity for every Nebraskan to contribute to the state's prosperity and to share in the state's prosperity. So I'm going to lay out 3 strategies that I'll pursue as governor to make that possible. And it starts with developing our renewable energy resources. You know, Nebraska has the 3rd greatest potential of any state in the union to generate electricity from wind. If you get in your car in the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, and you drive across the plains of eastern Colorado, you drive through Nebraska, across western Iowa to Des Moines, the place you'll see the fewest wind turbines is the state with the best wind. It's Nebraska. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that Colorado and Iowa instituted public policy to encourage wind development, while Nebraska had public policies that discourage wind development. And so, last session in the legislature, John and I, Farmers Union and Center for Rural Affairs, worked together to change that. And one of the problems that we had in Nebraska is that in Nebraska, we kind of singled out wind generation equipment for sales tax. You know, we don't charge sales tax on farm equipment, we don't charge on manufacturing equipment, we don't charge sales tax on coal, but we charge it on wind equipment. So we put together a proposal that said, we'll remove the sales tax on wind equipment, but for the mostly out-of-state developers that are going to developing wind, we're going to ask something back. We're going to ask that you develop the wind in a way that maximizes its potential to help build wealth and opportunity in Nebraska. So you have to share, either set aside some of the ownership for farmers and ranchers, and men and women who climb those towers to keep them running, employees, or you have to support Nebraska businesses by buying ultimately at least 20 or 30% of your inputs for your wind farm from Nebraska businesses. Now, the legislature did only half the job. They removed the sales tax, but without the incentive to develop wind right. So when I'm governor, we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that, and we're going to put the incentives in place, develop our world-class wind resource right, so that it benefits Nebraskans and not just out-of-state developers. I also want to push hard on our own public utilities here in Nebraska. They haven't done a very good job. Our own utilities, our own publicly controlled utilities, for whom we elect the boards, have not done a very good job of developing our world-class wind resource. Now, fortunately, a lot of us went to work and elected Fred Christensen last year, so we're making inroads on that, but we need to make more inroads on that. Keep electing more people like Fred to the boards, not only of NPPD, but of our rural electric districts, so we can get more wind developed by then. And we also need to go to work on transmission. You know, when you think about it for a minute, you think about ethanol. You know, we produce enough ethanol in Nebraska that we have to sell well over 95% of it out of the state. And we have the potential to produce enough wind that we have to sell most of it out of the state. And we lost a great opportunity a few years ago to do that. A private company by the name of Clean Line Energy came to the policymakers in Nebraska and said they wanted to build a power line. They wanted to build a power line from Nebraska to Peoria, Illinois, because from Peoria, Illinois, you could distribute that renewable energy to Chicago and a lot of other cities in the eastern grid. And cities and states, I might add, where they have renewable electricity standards that require their utilities to get 20% of their electricity from renewable sources. But when they went to the governor and wanted to work with him on the sales tax problem, he said it wasn't interested. So they're building that line. They're building it from Storm Lake, Iowa to Peoria, Illinois. And we're leaving thousands of good jobs on the table. We're leaving tens of millions of dollars in school finance that can help finance our education system, provide property tax relief, and we're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars in landowner payments on the table by that failure of leadership. Well, that's not going to happen when I'm governor. We're going to go to work to build the transmission, both from western Nebraska, the Panhandle, into the western grid, and from eastern Nebraska into the eastern grid, so that we can develop our world-class wind resource and create good jobs and opportunity across rural Nebraska. You know, we are the Saudi Arabia of wind. For us not to develop our world-class wind resource would be like Saudi Arabia not developing its oil. We got to do better, and I'm going to lead that effort to do better when I'm governor. You know, one place where we have done a good job of developing our renewable energy resource is in ethanol. We've been a leader among the states in developing ethanol. But you know, it was troubling to me that when EPA came forward with a rule to slash the renewable fuel standard, they could barely hear a peep out of Nebraska elected officials to challenge it. Well, when I'm governor, I'm going to fight for our ethanol industry and our producers who depend on that ethanol industry for the market for their product. I'm going to speak out on that. And the other thing I want to do as governor is that we need to develop more of a market right here in Nebraska for our own ethanol. You know, we're way behind on this part of the ethanol equation. You know, in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa, they do a much better job of getting blender pumps in place. So their own Iowa, South Dakota, and Minnesota consumers who want to use more of their own locally grown fuels can do it. So what I want to do is I want to go to work, try to work in partnership with our checkoff boards, our ethanol industry, to come up with the funds to finance more blender pumps in Nebraska, and then go to work with them to really promote it to our gas stations. Because I think it just makes good economic sense for us to use more of our own renewable fuels right here close to home. It's more efficient to use it close to home, and it's good for our consumers because it's a more affordable fuel supply for our own consumers. One last thing on biofuels. You know, we have been on the forefront. Unlike wind, we've been on the forefront in ethanol. But if we want to stay on the forefront in biofuels, we need to get together a strategy in Nebraska for next generation biofuels based on cellulose. So with a little advice from John, I've made a commitment that when I'm governor, I'm going to pull together a task force, farmers, scientists who are expert in this field, the ethanol industry, and environmentalists, to put together a strategy for us to develop, for us to be in the lead on next generation biofuels. And I think we have some great opportunities in this regard because we have the resources to develop next generation biofuels. You know, we have a lot of cedar, for example, in this state that we use for biofuels. You know, on most of our land, the crop residue that goes through the combine, that could be collected and used for biofuel with no damage to the soil. And look at our CRP acres. You know, today on our CRP acres, well, let me say, today we have fewer pheasants in Nebraska than at any time in recent decades. It's been decades since our pheasant numbers have been this low. And one of the reasons for that is what we're doing with our CRP acres. Our CRP acres have become a dense monoculture of switchgrass. And it's not good for bird nesting, and it's actually stunning the growth of the grass. And if we cut the grass once a year after nesting season, but early enough that the grass can regrow to provide winter cover, we have healthier stands on our CRP acres, we'd have more birds being hatched on our CRP acres, and we'd have healthier root system, we'd be fixing more carbon in the soil on our CRP acres, and we'd have a resource we could use to produce biofuel. And you know, if it biofuels, one of the things I'm interested in looking at, and having this task force look at, is gasification, which is a little bit of an alternative to ethanol itself. It's another biofuel. But gasification is what you get when you take cellulose and you heat it to about 500 degrees in the absence of oxygen. One of the things you get is fuel. The other thing you get is charcoal. You put that charcoal back in the ground, and it is the most stable form of soil organic matter. It lasts 1,000 years. It will build our soil organic matter, so our soils hold more water, so when we get a downpour, we can capture more of it in the soil, where we're going to need it in dry times. And it will help us sequester more carbon in the soil, which I believe ultimately farmers will get paid for. And it's the right thing to do, because it helps solve the single most critical environmental issue confronting our generation, which is climate change. And so I want to go to work making it happen. Second priority area for me is education. And you know, we have a problem in our state, and it's not limited to the inner cities. We have too many kids today in Nebraska who start kindergarten already so far behind that the odds are against them ever succeeding in school. And it affects us all. Those kids can't succeed in school and can't succeed in getting an education. In the long term, they're probably not going to contribute to our state's prosperity. In fact, they're probably going to come back to cost us in the form of public assistance, in the form of corrections, and law enforcement, and all the problems that go with it. And so I believe that the best long-term investment we can make in the future of our state is to give every kid, is to expand preschool. So we give every kid in the state at least a chance to start kindergarten prepared to succeed. And if that's our best long-term investment, maybe one of our best short-term investments that we need to do right now is that we need to expand job training. Because we have a lot of families in the state in low-wage jobs. And then we have a lot of good jobs going unfilled for welders, for example. It's holding back companies that want to grow. It's stopping the creation of good jobs in rural Nebraska and metropolitan Nebraska. And so I want to work with our employers, with our schools, with our community colleges to gear up job training. So families that need good jobs can get the skills that they need to get them, and so that employers who want to grow our economy across rural Nebraska and elsewhere can get the employees they need to do it. The last priority for me, and the last key to creating good jobs and opportunity, is that we need to make Nebraska one of the best places in America to start a value-added agricultural enterprise or a small business. You know, there is a whole new generation of small business opportunities out there today that didn't exist when I was a kid. When, for most businesses, your market was limited to a 25-mile radius. But the internet's changing that. And let me give you an example. I have a friend by the name of George Johnson. George ranches outside Cody, Nebraska, a town of 140 on the northwestern edge of the Sand Hills. A few years ago, George's oldest son came back to ranch. Now, I don't think they had enough land to support more families on the ranch. So anyway, George stopped ranching and started growing grapes, for the most part, and producing culinary vinegar for cooking. Well, today, George is selling culinary vinegar to the finest restaurants, not just in New York, or not just in Omaha, but in New York and San Francisco. And he's doing that because he has a quality product and he can sell it on the internet. And you know, I stopped out to see George a few months ago, and I bought a $10 bottle of his vinegar through Grow, Nebraska, and I said, well, give me one of all you got. He said, well, are you sure? And I said, sure, I'm sure. Well, by then I was kind of committed. And he brought out his balsamic vinegar. It sells for $47.50. It's not the size of a coffee cup. But that's what you can do when you have a really quality product and you can reach the finest restaurants in New York and San Francisco over the internet. And when I talked to George about how he was able to get that business started, he cited a program that we worked together, Nebraska Value-Added Agriculture. He said without that, it never would have got started. And it's a little program in the state that sets aside $800,000 a year to support value-added enterprises, help them get started. Now, we do some innovative things like that in Nebraska. You know, we've got a beginning farmer tax credit to provide an incentive to rent land to beginning farmers. Most people don't know about it because nobody's really out there promoting it, or at least nobody in government's really out there promoting it. We have a Nebraska Advantage Microenterprise Tax Credit. It provides a tax credit for beginning farmers, people starting ag-related enterprises, or somebody or any small business getting started or growing with up to 5 employees. But that's capped at $2 million, so you have to get it, you have to apply the year before, and it just doesn't work very well, nobody knows about it, and you got to apply so far in advance that it, and there's so little money there that very few of the people who would qualify get to use it. And you know, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on subsidies to the biggest businesses to lure jobs to Nebraska. We don't put a cap on their subsidies. But when it comes to helping small businesses and family enterprises that have been the backbone of our state's rural economy, you know, we cap them at $800,000 or $1 million or $2 million. Well, let me tell you, when I'm governor, small business is not going to be an afterthought. It's going to be a priority. We're going to make it happen. And it goes beyond money. It goes to how we approach regulation in Nebraska. And there is a bias against small enterprise in favor of large enterprise in the way we regulate in Nebraska. I remember the time John and I sat at DEQ on behalf of a cattle feeder who was a small farmer feeder who, you know, a lot of time his cattle spent out on the field, sometimes raising live corn, doing other things. But nevertheless, DEQ wanted to force him to do what probably works fine in a big feedlot, build a big lagoon. And he would have just had to quit feeding cattle. I mean, there's no way on an operation his size he could justify the cost of building a lagoon. And we got him back down on it. That's just one example. Let me give you another example. I got a buddy by the name of Robert Burke. Robert's a dairy farmer in Spalding. His cows strictly graze, and so he has grass-based milk, which has, you know, particularly different set of qualities to the fat that are sought after by a lot of people for their health benefits. So Robert, doing what good business people they tell us we're supposed to do today, he wanted to add value to his product. So he put a separator in his milk room where he stored the milking equipment, separate the cream, shipping it up to South Dakota, and making cheese. And he was selling it at a premium. I was buying this darn good cheese. The Department of Agriculture came out and shut him down. And they shut him down saying, if you want to do this, you got to build a new addition on your barn. You got to build a new addition on your barn with a cream separator. You can't put it in the room where you store your milking equipment. Now, I don't know how that made the cream or the cheese any safer. And it might work fine in a big milk processing plant, but it's a killer to a small entrepreneurial enterprise. So what I'm governor, we're going to comb through all the regulations of the state, ferret out the bias against small enterprise. And we need regulation to protect human health, to protect the environment, to protect safety. We have to do it in the right way. That's not biased in favor of corporate enterprise and against family and small enterprise. So I want to go to work on that. Well, in my mind, those are the keys to creating good jobs and opportunity for every Nebraskan. We support small enterprise. We make Nebraska a state with one of the best education systems at preventing kids from falling through the cracks, enabling people to get the skills they need to prosper and succeed in the 21st century. And we develop our world-class renewable energy resources. Now, some people see it differently. Some people say the key to prosperity in Nebraska and good jobs and opportunity is simply to cut taxes on the top 1 or 2%. Now, I disagree profoundly. Because two things happen when you set out with a focus on cutting taxes for the top 1 or 2%. The first is that you squander your capacity to invest in the future. If we set out to do that, we're not going to have the money to invest in small business development or preschool or other things that matter. But we're also inevitably going to shift taxes from those most able to pay to those less able to pay. And the best example is the tax proposal put forward last year, or this year, by Senator Bo McCoy and the governor, that would have eliminated the income tax, but shifted to a sales tax on farm inputs and on sick people. Farmers would have meant, in combination with property tax, $100 an acre before you even turn a wheel in taxes. And so I think this, and we need to do some things with property tax relief and can, but that ought to be the focus, not the top 1 or 2% in the income tax. And to put this in context, this focus on cutting taxes from the very top, and I'm going to end with this, but to put this in focus, you know, in 1970, the average CEO made 20 times the average worker. Today, the average CEO makes 200 times the average worker. And I don't believe that the way we make Nebraska stronger, or the way we make America stronger, is to shift taxes from the CEOs to the struggling working families that have been on the losing end of that trend. And history teaches us that. The historian Will Durant wrote that one of the things he saw throughout history is that great nations would rise, over time they would grow and prosper, and wealth would concentrate. And either they took steps to address it, or they would collapse. They would collapse of their own weight, because too few people had a stake anymore in that society to sustain it. And he wrote that when the invading armies that toppled the Roman Empire entered the hinterlands, they were bracing for a fight. They expected resistance, but they were met not by resistance, but by slaves, listlessly tilling the soil. The moral of that story is not that the invading armies are on the Kansas border. The moral of that story is that we want to make our state as strong as it can be. And we need to work to make our state a place where every Nebraskan, in every community, has genuine opportunity to contribute to this state's prosperity, to share in this state's prosperity, and become a contributing member of their community. And that's why I'm running for governor, and that's why I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming here. And regarding ethanol, I appreciate your statements. You know, right now we have trouble with some air quality issues. And you think they're signaling out, you know, just picking on ethanol because the oil companies are...
I'm not sure what's going on there, and you know, Roger may have a better handle on that than I do, or Gail or John.
Stick around for the next session, Norm. Have we got a deal for you?
Yeah.
Chuck, Randstad has initiated a very aggressive pro-ethanol defense in the RFS in Iowa, which is nice to see. Would you be inclined to do something similar in Nebraska, or cooperate with him, or do some sort of similar program to get that aggressive as governor?
Yeah, I mean, I think as governor, I want to fight for the ethanol industry. I mean, we need, it's an important industry in this state. The leadership, the elected leadership of the state needs to fight for it. And that's what I would do.
Yes. I was interested in any programs you might have specifically regarding wind and solar. We are in the top 10 in the nation for those resources, yet in the bottom third for generation. Other states have similar programs for exemption of sales tax, of property tax, of things like even a state tax credit or utility incentives. In all of those states, everywhere there is an incentive, it's been prospering greatly. Back in the 1980s when I got started, our solar contingents were all across the state. And they were part-time and full-time businesses. Today, there's just a handful of us and barely making it all together. So I think that this is something that perhaps a task force, a working group, or something of that nature might help spearhead, but I just thought I'd see if you had any programs or ideas regarding that.
Well, I think we need to look at some new tax credits for the right kind of renewable energy development that would support locally owned solar and wind, and that sort of thing. I also think solar is.
We expanded the form too to include solar.
Yeah, that's right. As John said, we expanded legislation last year to include solar. I mean, I also think we need to focus some real resources on solar research. Solar is coming, and it's not quite there, and it's the same cost competitiveness as wind yet, but it will get there, and when it does, it will be viable at a much smaller scale than wind, and so it will be much more viable for, you know, on-farm application and things like that. So I both think we do need some tax credits to support it, but I also think we need to be on the cutting edge in Nebraska in doing research on that and helping develop businesses to supply those solar panels going forward.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for being with us this morning. And I also want to, I think now would be an opportune time. I visited with our PAC president, Gail Lush, and our Nebraska Farmers Union PAC board has voted to endorse Chuck Hassebrook for governor. So, there he is.